that shit.
Welcome to Trash Talk MMA.
Smile on my face, behind my back, and talk trash.
The #1 podcast for news and insight that matters in the world of mixed martial arts.
I don't want to hear it.
Brought to you live and unfiltered from all four corners of the globe
That's what you said.
by MMA aficionado Antoine Pelche.
Yo, and welcome to the latest edition of the Trash Talk MMA podcast. I'm your host, Antoine Pelche, and once again, I am joined by my special guest, Tiger Muay Thai fitness trainer and pro MMA fighter, Sam Bastin. Sam, how's it going, buddy?
Yeah, good. It's good to be back here again, Antoine. Thanks for having me back.
So on that note, we have a lot to talk about today because we have a big fight weekend. Tonight, it's Friday, there's Invicta FC 11 and Bellator 134. I already did a preview podcast about those things, so we're going to skip to the big guns and jump all over UFC 184. So as we all know, UFC 184, there's a big title fight, women's bantamweight, Ronda Rousey against Zingano. But amidst all the hype, it might have been lost in the mix that this fight was supposed to be a totally different card, and there were some incredible matchups that were announced that fell apart. So I'd like to just before going into the actual card that's going to go down, I thought we could discuss what this card was actually planned to be and some of the unfortunate incidents that occurred that altered this card quite radically. So, of course, the big fight that was supposed to occur here was a UFC middleweight championship bout between Chris Weidman and Vitor Belfort. That much delayed pairing was previously scheduled to take place also at UFC 173 and also at UFC 181. On January 30th, the UFC announced that Weidman had pulled out of the bout, citing an injury sustained in training. I mean, what a loss to this card.
I know, yeah, this is a great fight, potentially a great fight. And with having to reschedule this fight 3 to 4 times now, and maybe even another time again, it still hasn't happened. But I'm really looking forward to that fight because I think Vitor can definitely pull an upset towards. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's it's just an absolute slobber knocker in the making. To see that, it was supposed to happen at UFC 173, 181, and then today or tomorrow on 184, and is now officially scheduled at UFC 187. This fight just has to happen, man. It's just cursed. It does.
And like you said, with this card, and this has been rescheduled 3 times now, plus the amount of other rescheduling fights that have had to occur on this show as well.
So what do you think about the rise of Chris Weidman? I mean, I think that it's an incredible story. I mean, this guy seemingly came out of nowhere. I remember seeing him fight his first few fights in the UFC, and he was really, really taking it to guys. And then I remember he went into a decision against Damian Maia. But really where Weidman put the fear of God in me and a few other viewers was when he beat up Mark Munoz. I don't know if you remember that fight.
That was a good fight, and the finisher with the elbow, that was nasty.
Hellacious. I mean, the elbow that he hit him with on the feet, but especially the elbows that he kept hitting him with on the ground. Definitely. I think that altered Mark Munoz's career. I've met Mark Munoz actually working on UFC Undisputed 3. Really, really nice guy. This was before this happened, and he had a really, really good mojo going on. And it seems like since the Weidman loss that Munoz hasn't quite been. I mean, that really set back Munoz's career. Yeah,
he has. Munoz has been struggling a little bit since that fight there. And I think he was on at one stage about a 4 or 5 win streak before he came up against. Yeah,
he was being talked about as a title contender for sure. And then ran into the freight train that is Chris Weidman. And then let's go to Vitor. I mean, Vitor has just been a wrecking machine. Three head kick knockouts over Luke Rockhold, Michael Bisping, and the indestructible Dan Henderson.
All in devastating fashion as well. Those head kicks have all been pretty brutal. So.
Yeah, when I was just building my website, trashtalkmma.com, I have a podcast section and a news and blog section, then a video section, and I didn't have anything to put in the video section yet, but the UFC had given away a free fight, and it was Vitor Belfort against Dan Henderson, and so I decided to revisit that fight, and oh my God, it was just brutal. I mean, he clobbered him on the feet with punches, and then as soon as he stood up, he literally kicked him shin to mouth.
And I don't think anyone actually seen Dan Henderson go out like that as well. That's the first time he's ever been stopped via strikes. So
KTFO'd. Yeah.
Mental.
Mental. All right, let's keep working our way down the card. So subsequently, with the loss of that main event, a UFC Women's Bantamweight Championship bout between current champion Ronda Rousey and top contender Kat Zingano was promoted to the main event. Belfort was offered an interim title fight against Lyoto Machida and then Gegard Mousasi as a replacement for Weidman, but he declined and stated that he would only fight for the full title. I think Vitor did the right thing. I don't want to see Vitor Machida. I certainly don't want to see Vitor Mousasi. Those guys, they're just not in the position that he's in.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's also Vitor has that position to say that as well. I mean, with all the drug scandals and things going on lately, wasn't he accused of doing some sort of
he was one of the elite fighters on testosterone replacement therapy on TRT.
Yeah.
So I agree he's had to get off of that and adapt his body to not having that substance in it in order for him to be licensed to compete.
Yeah.
He's actually undergone an extensive series of out of competition testing that so far he's passed with flying colors.
That's good.
I mean, I think he's in the clear on that level. It's just going to be interesting to see if his performance is altered because of not having TRT in his system.
I mean, I think he should be fine. So hopefully we can see him back in there soon. I was hoping that he would have taken either one of those fights against Machida. He should have taken that fight, in my opinion. I mean, it's another fight. Everyone's here for the same reason. Interim title as well. That would have potentially set him up straight away for as soon as he's ready for Weidman straight away for that match.
Because did Machida have a fight since losing to Weidman? I don't think so.
I don't think he has, no.
So I'm like, okay, I don't know. To me, the way I perceive that is that Machida lost to Weidman. He hasn't had a fight since. To immediately get another title fight off of a loss against Vitor, I don't think that Machida had earned it. And certainly Gegard Mousasi has been really up and down. He looked great against Dan Henderson. But even that stoppage was somewhat controversial with the eye cut, and people thought the fight was stopped a little too soon. So I don't think either of those. I think they could have put up a fight against those guys, but to make it an interim title fight, Machida, there might be some justification for it, but I wouldn't be able to give that to Mousasi yet.
Yeah, okay.
No.
Yeah.
So then another fight. Neil Magny, who's on a 6-fight winning streak at welterweight, was briefly linked to a bout with Josh Koscheck at the event. However, Magny was pulled from the fight in favor of a bout with Kiichi Kunimoto at UFC Fight Night 60. I think that happened 3-4 weeks ago. And Koscheck is now facing Jake Ellenberger on this card.
This is an interesting fight due to the fact that both of these guys are coming into this fight with 3 losses apiece. Obviously, they're both coming off, I think it's TKO losses in their last fights.
Well, I remember Koscheck got absolutely smashed by Lawler. Ellenberger got smashed by
Kelvin Gastelum.
Yes, Kelvin Gastelum. He didn't TKO him. He smashed him on the feet and then submitted him on the ground.
On the ground, yeah.
What else happened to Koscheck? Koscheck got his face punched off by Tyrone Woodley. Remember that?
Yeah, that was
gnarly.
That was a nasty knockout.
That was a nasty knockout. That was one of the best highlight reels of last year. That was an incredible stoppage by Tyrone. My opinion on both fighters right now is at least Josh Koscheck has been coming out and fighting like Josh Koscheck. Where I'm upset with Jake Ellenberger is that he's changed his style. He's put out some interviews this week saying that there's no room for Jake Ellenberger in the octagon. Nobody wants to see Jake Ellenberger in the octagon. People want to see the juggernaut. And I think that's right. He switched up his style, and I hate when guys do that. To a certain extent, I feel like Rory McDonald's done the same thing. He came out, that fight where he was fucking around with Nate Diaz, just throwing him all across the octagon, suplexes, and it almost looked like a pro wrestling fight the way he was ragdolling him. So he was beating the earth, wind, and fire out of dudes, right? And then that just stopped, and it turned into this kind of this pity-patty point fighting shit that he did it against BJ Penn, and I friggin' hate when guys come out with that. That's an aptly named style, a juggernaut style of guys that come out and bulldoze and steamroll dudes. And Jake Ellenberger was awesome for that. I loved how he plowed through Jake Shields. I'm definitely not a Jake Shields fan. I mean, I don't know the guy personally, but I don't like his fighting style. Ellenberger, for me, was one of the style of fighter that I liked to see, and I haven't seen him bring that in 4 or 5 fights.
It's interesting that we're talking about fighting styles because this day and age with the uprise in all these new athletes that are coming through the MMA, that's the problem. They're athletes. There's not as many fighters around these days. These guys aren't going in there to knock someone out. They're going in there to just grind out a decision. And I think that's a big problem with the MMA scene in the UFC at this stage. I think there needs to be some more aspects to where these guys are actually trying to finish fights.
Yeah, I mean, I think in Ellenberger's case, I mean, he's certainly proven that he's a tremendous fighter and that he's a tremendous athlete. What's interesting in his case is to see the sort of mental deterioration. And look, I hope he brings it. I hope he brings it tomorrow night. Definitely. But as of right now, until I see Jake Ellenberger bring the fight and push the pace, I'll be rooting for Koscheck, because Koscheck has been... He's been a UFC staple. I think it's his 18th or 19th fight. I mean, the guy has been there, done that, and he always brings it. And I love how he modified his style, coming out being a bit of a boring lay and pray type wrestler style, and then he developed into a tremendous power puncher, very exciting fighter, a real company man. I'll be rooting for Josh Koscheck tomorrow night.
I'm with you on that. I'm going through Koscheck for a decision.
A decision?
Decision.
Well, I hope Koscheck gets a knockout. Or listen, I hope Jake Ellenberger does too. You know, whatever it does. I mean, if Jake Ellenberger comes back and puts on the juggernaut style, I'll be the first one rooting. But in the meantime, he's had the opportunity to do that against top flight competition. He also lost to Robbie Lawler.
Yes.
That's the other loss. Lawler, man. Okay, we'll get to him. Jesus, that guy's crazy. Moving on down. About between touted newcomer Holly Holm and Raquel Pennington, originally booked for UFC 181 and ultimately scrapped due to Holm being injured, will now serve as the co-headliner. You excited to see Holm in the UFC?
Excited to see female fights in general. I'm a big fan of the female fights due to the fact that these girls bring it to the table every time.
Yep. Yeah, I have. Are you subscribed to UFC Fight Pass?
No, I'm not actually.
They've actually, maybe we can do this after we watch this. They've posted basically, I think, all of Holly Holm's fights in other promotions, so we can watch them because they've all been very quick and devastating. And I wouldn't mind just doing a little research on all of her scraps before we tune into that fight tomorrow night. Mark Munoz was briefly scheduled for a bout with Caio Malgalas at the event. However, shortly after the bout was announced by the UFC, Malgalas indicated that he would not be able to compete at the event due to a lingering infection after recent dental surgery, which would require additional surgery. Munoz is expected to stay on the card, and he is against returning UFC veteran Juan Carneiro. Yeah, so Juan Carneiro, he's been with American Top Team since 2008. He did a stint in the UFC where he was kind of off and on, not too many notable wins. And since leaving the UFC on a loss to Ryo Chonin, he's gone 7-1 with one submission loss. No real notable names with his victories except for his last one that was over veteran Brock Larson. Mark Munoz on his end is he's in a slump for sure. You know, we touched on it at the start of the show. He's 1-3. He got submitted by Gegard Mousasi, head kick knocked out by Lyoto Machida. Won a decision over Tim Boetsch before that, and he actually looked good in his return after that vicious loss to Chris Weidman.
The difference between these two guys, I think Munoz has still been fighting some top caliber fighters. These guys are still in the top 10.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And with this other guy coming back to the UFC, I think that's a different caliber of fighter in general.
That's a very, very good point. We're quick to write Munoz off here as being on a bit of a in a bit of a funk, but Gegard Mousasi, dude, do you remember when Gegard Mousasi was fighting in Dream? Like, he was running through Dennis Kang. He knocked out Jacare from his back with a fucking an up kick to the jaw, brutal. Made short work out of Melvin Manhoff. At that time, I was actually hoping to be like, yo, get this guy in the UFC. He's on fire. I could actually see him putting up a competitive fight against Anderson Silva, who was on the Anderson Silva tear at the time.
Yeah, I think it really depends who comes with the better game plan for the fight. Obviously not sticking to just one game plan, but who can come and bring the best of their ability to the board for this fight.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, Munoz has just been facing elite competition all this time, whereas Juan Carneiro has been out of the UFC facing, not easy competition, but certainly not elite level competition, and we might see Munoz come through with a pretty brutal victory based on that alone.
I think Munoz will. I've definitely got his back on this one with a stoppage win for this.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on that. So continuing on with the changes that have occurred on this card, a heavyweight bout between Frank Mir and Antonio Silva originally scheduled for the main card, was moved up a week and served as the event headliner for UFC Fight Night 61 that just occurred this past Saturday. So, of course, we know what happened there. A slick jab followed by a short little, what looked like a relatively harmless left hook by Frank Mir, put the lights out on Antonio Silva, followed up by a horrifying ground and pound.
And that goes to show with Bigfoot's chin, it has been quite suspect in his last couple of fights as well. Yep. He did have that big slug with Mark Hunt. Yep. That was a very, very tough fight for both of those guys as well. But coming to this fight with Mir, Mir looked very, very sharp on his feet. I think that's the best he's looked in a very long time. Good slick boxing, nice and quick, moving well, setting things up really good.
Yeah, I think if we look back at at Bigfoot's recent fights, getting knocked out cold by Daniel Cormier in Strikeforce, putting on that war with Hunt, even though, if he didn't get knocked out, he still took just an unfathomable amount of power shots by Mark Hunt. And doctors will tell you that's not because you don't get knocked out that you're not getting concussed. He also, he had that crushing victory over Overeem, but then he also got punched out very quickly by Andrei Arlovsky in his previous fight, and now this fight by Frank Mir. What did you think of the quality of that hook? You're a pro fighter, you know better than me. I thought Mir barely put his hips into it. It didn't look like a knockout punch.
It just looked like it honestly touched him. But at the end of the day,
accuracy, heavyweights.
Yeah, they're big. They're big guys. These guys. And
exactly.
You clip someone on the chin, that jaw slides across. Probably could put anyone out.
Yep.
It just depends on where you get hit, how you get hit.
Yeah, working on the UFC video games, we'd often, launch the games in Vegas, and at those times, we'd have the opportunity to, we do these launch parties where the UFC would bring in a good 50, 60 UFC fighters, and so it was a great opportunity to meet some of these guys. And it's funny when you'd stand next to some of them, I don't know, guys like Dan Hardy and stuff, and they didn't really feel that intimidatingly big. Even, I remember standing and talking with Rich Franklin, and, he's a 185, and people consider him a big one, but I still didn't feel... like this guy, okay, this guy's, scary. But you stand next to Frank Mir, dude. He's a big, thick, fucking scary dude. And like you said, he's a heavy. We're talking heavyweights here. Yeah. Even though they're not putting maybe everything into it, what they're putting there is going to put you down. Yeah,
these guys, what do they walk around in pounds? I'm not too sure. Their walk around weight is insane, So once they're dropping down and cutting to the weight and then putting all this weight back on, these dudes are walking in pretty heavy into that cage.
Yep. All right, next up, there was a middleweight bout scheduled between Ronaldo Souza and Jacare. He was expected to face Yoel Romero at this event. However, on January 15th, Souza was forced to withdraw from this bout with pneumonia. The pairing was left intact, and the fight has now been rescheduled for UFC on Fox 15. I'm pissed this fight ain't happening now. I'm a huge fan of both of these fighters, and Yoel Romero, to me, has been the most refreshing addition to the middleweight division.
I'm honestly not too familiar with either fighter. I don't know why. I just obviously missed out on their careers slightly. But, I don't know. I'm not too familiar with their backgrounds and things like that.
Okay, all I can say is go check out both guys. That's another thing. We can fire up Fight Pass and find some Ronaldo, some Jacare fights. He's an incredible grappler, an incredible submission artist, and he's added a level of athleticism and strike into his game that's just frightening. A very, very all-around complete fighter. He decimated Gegard Mousasi in a rematch of the fight that I was talking about before, of when he got up, kicked, knocked out in Dream. Yoel Romero, you didn't see that fight against Tim Kennedy? Where he stayed too long on the stool? It happened a couple months ago.
Yep.
So that's Yoel Romero.
Okay.
He's a big, thick black dude, and he comes out and he eats a lot of shots, and he just has this capacity to come back from the brink of defeat and obliterate guys on the way out. So, I just like those dudes. They make for interesting fights. Obviously that fight was controversial. If you didn't see it, Tim Kennedy versus Yoel Romero. Kennedy had Romero really, really on the rocks at the end of, I believe, round 2.
Yeah, and then that's where he stayed on the stool.
He stayed on the stool. Big John McCarthy approached him and told him he had to get up and join the fight, and then he noticed there was a big glob of Vaseline on his eye still. So then he brought in the corner guys to remove the glob of Vaseline. It basically gave Romero another 30 seconds to a minute to get his wits back to him, and then he came out like a bat out of hell and just tore Kennedy up, man, in what was one of the most vicious displays of striking of late last year. Anyway, thank God the fight's rescheduled for UFC on Fox 15. It's going to be huge. We'll deal with that when that date comes around. Last but not least, Yancy Medeiros was slated to face Tony Ferguson at this event, but an injured foot forced him out of the bout. On the same day, Gleison Tibau was announced as his replacement. Is it just me, or is Tibau fighting like every month or something these days?
He has been very, very active lately. It's good that he's coming off 3 wins. Both of these guys are actually coming off 3 wins. Tony Ferguson, 17-3. Gleison Tibau, 33-10. This is a very, very highly educated fight because these guys both have a lot of experience up their sleeves.
Yeah. I think, doesn't Gleison Tibau hold the record for I think he's the UFC fighter who's had the most UFC fights. He's got a weird career though. Like, it's like he's kind of always there. He's like outside of the top 10. He's been there for like 5 years or something. Like, what's stopping Gleison Tibau from getting into the top 10 and actually making a run at the title?
I think he gets, with his career, if you actually look at his career, I think he has like a couple of good wins and then he'll get that loss that just sets him back a step or two every time. And then again, like his last 3 wins have all been by decision. Yeah. And I think that's the problem as well. We're not seeing amazing efforts from him. We're still seeing just a grind out sort of, obviously going to decision every time. Yeah,
because I mean, if you look at his last 3 wins, they're against Norman Park, Piotr Hallman, Pat Healy. Okay, nobody, the only guy in there that's worth mentioning is Pat Healy. Before that, he got knocked out by Michael Johnson. That was vicious. Before that, he won a split decision over one of my favorite fighters. One of my favorite fighters, Jamie Varner. Okay, yeah, Jamie Varner's awesome. Now retired. And then before that, he had a submission over John Cholish. Again, not an elite fighter. Previously to that, lost a split decision to Evan Dunham. Won a decision over Francisco Trinaldo. Lost a decision to the number 2 contender right now, Khabib Nurmagomedov. So yeah, I mean, he just can't get on that run of wins and get stoppage wins.
Yeah, that's it. It's just up, down, up, down. He's never putting together that consecutive amount of fights where I think he can break through that top 10 scene.
Tony Ferguson, on the other end, I'm a big fan. I think since emerging as the winner of the Ultimate Fighter, Team Lesnar versus Team Dos Santos, Tony Ferguson has looked fantastic.
Yeah, again, like I said earlier, 17-3 record. He's had some tough fights. I'm very interested in this fight because I'm a big fan of Gleison Tibau, so I think he's going to win this fight, and I think he'll win it by decision again. But I would like to see more from Tibau in this fight.
So what makes you a big fan of Gleison Tibau? I've never met somebody actually say that.
I enjoy his fights. I do. I like watching him fight, and I see him gas every time he gasses in that second round, but he still pulls through. Somehow he just...
Yeah, he's durable.
Yeah, he's a very durable fighter. And
that's why it's always impressive when somebody stops him, because you're just used to him always going the 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So Ferguson is coming off a submission win over another one of my current favorite fighters, Abel Trujillo. He's really good. Split decision win over Danny Castillo. That's nothing to scoff at either. A KO over Katsunori Kikuno, and a submission win over Mike Rio. And previously before that, he also has a loss to Michael Johnson. Michael Johnson, who just beat Edson Barbosa on Saturday night before Frank Mir and Antonio Silva. So Michael Johnson is kind of the common thread between those two fighters. And contrary to Gleison Tibau, Michael Johnson's certainly been able to put together an incredible streak of wins right now. He's 4-0. So we've looked at quite a few of the big fights. We're going to be getting to the main event soon. I just want to roll back to the prelims, where there's going to be a bantamweight fight against Roman Salazar and Norifumi, aka Kid Yamamoto. Kid Yamamoto, what a bust in the UFC, and what's happened to this guy's career? He was on fire in Japan. There was a tremendous amount of anticipation for him coming into the UFC, and when he did, he made his debut in February 2011 at UFC 126, and he got soundly defeated by current champion Demetrius Johnson of the UFC flyweight division. After that, he lost a decision to Darren Uyenoyama, and also got submitted by Voan Lee. So, I mean, things are not looking good for Kid Yamamoto. He's basically 1-5 in his last 6.
Well, he better probably win this matchup he's got coming up, because I think the UFC will probably knock him back.
It's interesting that they chose to bring him back on this card. You'd think that with him being 1-5, that that they would have maybe put him on this Philippines card, or at least put a popular Asian fighter on a fight taking place in Asia, where they're a lot more forgiving for extensive loss records. Back in Pride, people could if you were an exciting fighter, you could go lose 6, 7, 8 fights. No one cared. As long as you brought the fighting spirit. A Western crowd, and in particular an American and Canadian crowd, are a lot less forgiving for people with 1-5 records fighting in the UFC. Moving back up to the main card, let's talk about Alan Juban versus Richard Walsh at welterweight. Alan Juban had an interesting UFC debut where he knocked out the always durable Seth Basinski. That was the biggest win and the biggest name on Juban's record. And from there, he went on to lose a decision at UFC Fight Night Shogun versus St. Preux in November of 2014 versus Warley Alves. He'll be fighting Richard Walsh, who is an Australian mixed martial artist. That's where you're from.
Yeah, definitely. I actually went to the tryouts with Richie Walsh. I think he's got a good chance of winning this fight. Both fighters are very, very durable fighters. Richard Walsh with his fighting. He's only had 2 fights in the UFC now. His win against Chris Indich, also from Australia. And I'm not too sure who he's... he had a controversial...
There's a decision split loss to Kiichi Kunimoto.
Yeah.
That's the guy that Neil Magny beat a couple weekends ago.
Yeah. So, I mean, Richie Walsh coming into the fight with an 8-2 record. I see a very even matchup with Alan Juban being a 10-3 record. A really good potential matchup. But I see Richie Walsh winning a decision.
Okay, now when you said you came to the tryouts with him, what do you mean the tryouts?
Yeah, sorry, back to that. The tryouts with Richie Walsh. I was actually at the tryouts in Sydney for Australia versus Canada.
Oh, so you mean the tryouts for the Ultimate Fighter?
Yeah, for the Ultimate Fighter. Yeah.
Oh, nice. So you actually attended those?
Yeah, I did.
What was that experience like?
Yeah, different experience. Hopefully next time, if I ever go back to maybe another tryouts in the future, I get a bit more of an actual tryout. Half the guys there, and you only get like 2 minutes of wrestling, 2 minutes of sort of jiu-jitsu, and then if they're not very interested with you, they send half the guys home like instantly. Okay,
maybe that's something that when we do another one-on-one podcast, we could cover that. I've actually never spoken with somebody who's attended one of these Ultimate Fighter tryouts, and I think that'd be an interesting thing that my listeners would like to hear about.
Definitely.
Okay, so then moving on, let's talk about the main event. We got Ronda Rousey, women's bantamweight champion, undefeated versus Cat Zingano.
I find this fight the most interesting female fight in the UFC. Since the females have been around. Both fighters are undefeated. Rousey 10-0, Zingano 9-0. I think depends on who shows up better on the night, because Zingano has had a lot of time off. Rousey has been quite regular, active with the fights.
Yeah, depends. I mean, like Rousey's last fight was, July 5th of last year. Whereas Cat Zingano, when did she last compete? She last competed against Amanda Nunes in September of last year.
And I think that's the only fight she's had.
She was injured. Well. Yeah. So, yes, for sure, within a comparable period of time, Ronda Rousey's been the more active fighter.
Yeah.
Who are you rooting for? What would you like to see happen? We're in a situation here, almost like a John Jones' type situation. I would like to see Cat Zingano bring a fight to Ronda Rousey the way that Alexander Gustafsson brought a fight to John Jones. We need to start seeing some chinks in the Ronda Rousey armor, or things are just not going to be interesting anymore in this division.
I think where Zingano can win this is on the feet, if she can keep it up. Obviously, Rousey's striking has developed a lot as well. And also, obviously, her whole fighting style has developed. Her last 2 fights have both been by TKO stoppages, if that's correct. Yep, both by TKO stoppages. And again, Zingano, she's been out for a little while, but again, it's a very, very hard fight to pick from. I'm leading towards Rousey winning the fight, but I would like to see Zingano win the fight.
Yeah.
If that complicates things.
Yeah, I mean, it does and it doesn't. Cat Zingano's faced tremendous adversity. If you look at some of the tragedies that she's experienced in her life of late, She lost her husband, I believe, to suicide.
Yes.
About a year ago. She had an incredible fight where she demolished the incredible Miesha Tate, who looked just spectacular in her last fight. What a durable woman. You know, so she won that fight. It made her the number one contender. She was supposed to be on The Ultimate Fighter against Ronda Rousey and get a title shot. She lost that opportunity. She lost the title shot, and she lost her husband. I mean, even she's saying that she has a lot of similar traits in her life that correspond with similar traits in Ronda Rousey's life. And I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of respect between these two fighters, unlike, for example, the Ronda Rousey-Miesha Tate rivalry.
I think that's a funny, interesting fact as well, with Rousey actually not showing much respect for a lot of the previous female fighters.
Yep.
With Zingano, I think she's going to definitely show some respect with Zingano.
I think she's probably saying to herself, this is going to be a good test.
Yeah, definitely.
You know? But I think Ronda Rousey's been a tremendous addition to the UFC. You know, only a few short years ago, Dana White was saying you'd never see women in the octagon. They are now in the octagon, and they're, for the very first time tonight or tomorrow night, they'll be headlining and co-headlining a UFC pay-per-view. I mean,
that's also UFC history too, with a headline and a co-headline as well.
Yeah, you know, it's a legit numbered UFC pay-per-view. Of course, this event was supposed to have Chris Weidman versus Vitor, you know, which was the real seller here. But, you know, Ronda Rousey's a bona fide superstar. She's in the swimsuit edition of Sports Illustrated. She's all over the place. And I love her because she knows how to talk a ton of shit. She's talking a ton of shit about Ariane right now. Have you been following them?
A little bit of it. I haven't seen too much of it.
You know, she said something like, you know, to Ariane, like, yo, it's like your job is to show your tits and I'm even doing that better than you. It's like some funny stuff. So I'm always a fan of the people that talk the talk and also walk the walk, and Ronda Rousey certainly fits that category, undeniably.
What's your opinion on the fight? Who would you like to see pull the victory?
Okay, tonight you have a featherweight title fight in Invicta involving Cyborg Santos. So if she can win, she's fighting, I believe, Charmaine Tweet. Tweet's being set up here to get steamrolled. She doesn't at all have the credentials to fight Cyborg. So, you know, Cyborg's going to come out of this thing victorious. The Invicta champ at 45. We all know about the beef between her and Ronda. I'd like to see Cyborg win tonight, drop down to 135, make it successfully, have a fight in Invicta at that weight class, or even a debut fight in the UFC at that weight class, prove that she can fight at that weight, and then let's get that fight, because that is the super fight. The fight with Kat Zingano here is probably the most truly legit women's bantamweight fight that could be made in the world right now, and I expect it to be excellent. But the fight that everybody wants to see and that has really all the trash talk, all the bad blood, is the fight between Ronda and Cyborg.
Definitely. It's a very interesting fight if that can ever happen.
Yeah. So for Ronda to lose this fight, it would still always make for an interesting fight. But for her being the champ, and if the Invicta 145 champ is coming in, there's all this bad blood. I mean, it could potentially be one of the biggest fights in UFC history, and it would be between two women, which would be just an incredible turn of events just over the course of very few short years.
I think it's only been almost 2 years now since the female divisions have been in the UFC.
Yep. And
definitely making a big impact. As a lot of these females, again, are bringing the fight to the table, bringing their skills to the table every show.
You training at Tiger Muay Thai, every time I go into that place, I feel like I'm seeing more and more chicks. I walk in there someday and I see like almost, I'm like, where are the dudes training? It's like there's tons and tons of women training. You're training there, you're there every day. What are your thoughts? Are you really seeing women getting interested in competing in martial arts?
Yeah, martial arts in general. I think we see a lot of females crossing towards doing Muay Thai here first.
Yep.
I think that is a big aspect of MMA in itself, starting learning Muay Thai. So for a lot of females, that's where they generally begin. Not so much towards the MMA side, but seeing them get involved with the Muay Thai is definitely interesting. Okay, well, Sam, it looks like we've pretty much covered the entire card. I'm stoked. I think UFC 184 was supposed to be something bigger, but, you know, sitting down with you here and actually going through this, there's a lot of interesting fighters on this card. There's still some star power on it. There's some interesting matchups, and above all, there's really some notable matchups. So, you know, let's just tune in. I guess for us, it'll be Sunday morning here in Thailand.
and see what goes down and see if Ronda Rousey can successfully defend her belt against her most dangerous threat.
Definitely an interesting card. Can't wait to catch all these fights Sunday morning here in Thailand. It's going to be good.
All right, man. I'm going to hold you to it. We're going to watch those Sunday, and we'll be doing the recap together.
Thank you very much.
All right, everybody. TrashTalkMMA.com. I'm your host, Antoine Pelche, with my guest, pro fighter Sam Bastin from Australia, signing off from Phuket, Thailand. Peace.
Thanks for listening to the Trash Talk MMA podcast. Be sure to visit TrashTalkMMA.com.
On my face, behind my back, and talk trash.
And don't forget to follow Antoine on Twitter at Trash Talk MMA. Let us know you're listening. Use hashtag Trash Talk MMA.